After the accident, my family describes to me the life I never had. I woke up from a car accident with partial amnesia. My wife and children tell me about our happy life, but I found my hidden diary, which describes how I was going to leave them because I was afraid of their cruelty. The first thing I remember is the sharp smell of bleach. It seemed to scrub the air clean of any other scent. I am 48 years old, and I used to be an architect. My name is Mark, or at least that is what they tell me. They say I was in a car accident about a month ago. A bad patch of black ice sent my car into a spin. My wife, Sarah, tells me this story with perfect calmness. She says I am lucky that I only have partial amnesia. My long-term memories are apparently intact, just the last few years are foggy. We have been married for 20 years, she reminds me daily. She is a kind woman with gentle hands and a patient smile. I live in this quiet house that is supposedly my own home. Sarah brings me all of my meals on a wooden tray. The food is always bland, like chicken broth and mashed potatoes. She claims these were always my favorite comfort foods. I just nod and eat because arguing requires too much energy. She plays classical music in the evenings from a small speaker. She says it used to help me relax after a long day at work. I do not recognize any of the soaring, complicated symphonies. It all just sounds like noise that makes my head ache. Our two teenage kids, a boy and a girl, visit my room sometimes. They stand in the doorway and look at me with pity. They tell me small stories about our life before the crash. They talk about family vacations to a beach I cannot picture. They mention a dog named Buster that I do not remember owning. Everything they say feels like a story about someone else's father. Last night, I was running my hand over the wooden bed frame. My fingers found a long, thin scar on my left palm. I asked Sarah where it came from during breakfast this morning. She smiled and said, I cut it on a barbed wire fence as a kid. She told me I used to tell the story all the time, but the scar is a clean, straight line, not a jagged tear. It feels like it was made by a sharp kitchen knife. I have tried to make this new life feel like my own. Sarah brought down a heavy photo album for me this afternoon. She pointed to a picture of us on a sunny beach. She said it was from our anniversary trip last year. The man in the photograph looked happy next to his wife. I did not feel any connection to his wide, vacant smile. He looked like a stranger wearing my face for a picture. She showed me my home office at the end of the hall. The room was perfectly clean and everything was in its place. Architectural models were arranged on a shelf, completely free of dust. My professional books stood on the shelves with unbroken spines. It looked more like a museum display than a real workspace. I do not remember being such a neat and tidy person. My children, Leo and Maya, continue to keep their distance. They enter my room and ask if I need anything. Their questions sound rehearsed, like lines from a school play. They never stay long enough for a real conversation to begin. They never hug me or make any physical contact at all. I tried telling an old joke that Sarah said was my favorite. Leo and Maya just stared at me with blank, nervous expressions. Sarah forced a laugh that sounded brittle and entirely fake. The silence that followed was heavy and incredibly uncomfortable. They are afraid of me, or maybe they are just afraid of saying the wrong thing. Yesterday, I felt strong enough to walk down the hallway alone. My bedroom door was open just a little bit. I heard Sarah talking to Leo in a low, urgent voice. She was not using her patient and gentle tone with him. She told him he had to stick to the story exactly. She said that any mistake could ruin everything for them. It was a command, not a piece of motherly advice. Sarah's words to Leo echoed in my mind for days. The illusion of a peaceful recovery had been completely shattered. I knew I had to find something to prove I wasn't crazy. Yesterday, Sarah announced she was taking the kids to the city. She said they were going shopping for a few hours. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway. My body felt weak, but my mind was suddenly very clear. I went directly into the master bedroom's walk-in closet. I started by checking the pockets of my old coats. I ran my hands along the top shelves behind stacks of sweaters. My fingers brushed against a floorboard that felt slightly loose. I pried it up with my nails and found a hollow space. Inside was a small black notebook held shut with a rubber band. I opened it and immediately recognized my own messy handwriting. The looping letters and sharp angles were unmistakably mine. The journal entries chronicled the last year of my life. I wrote about a marriage that had become an empty cage. I described Sarah's cold indifference and her subtle cruelty. I detailed my secret plan to leave her for good. I had already rented a small apartment across town. I had a secret bank account with enough money to start over. The very last entry was dated the day before the crash. I had written that I was finally telling her everything. I was going to ask for a divorce the next morning. The notebook fell from my trembling and sweaty hands. This was not a story about a happy, loving family. It was the terrifying record of a man planning his escape. My wife was not my caretaker, but my determined jailer. The accident now seemed like a convenient, perfect solution. I placed the notebook back into its dark, hollow space. I had to pretend that I had not found anything at all. The truth was now a dangerous secret I had to keep. At dinner, I decided to test the edges of their story. I casually mentioned having a strange and vivid dream. I described a small apartment with a view of the park. Sarah's calm expression did not falter for a single second. She gently touched my hand and said my mind was healing. She explained that brain trauma can create very realistic visions. She told me not to worry about these confusing mental glitches. Later, I asked Maya about our last trip to the beach. My diary had described that week as 7 days of misery. Maya mumbled something about the sand being nice that year. Leo quickly changed the subject to a show he was watching. They both refused to make any eye contact with me. Their silence was a carefully constructed and impenetrable wall. For a moment, I felt a deep and confusing wave of guilt. Maybe the diary was a collection of my own angry delusions. Perhaps the accident had twisted my perceptions of the past. I wondered if my plan to leave was a selfish, cruel act. Did my unhappiness push my family into this desperate position? Was I the real reason for all of this elaborate deception? Sarah's performance is so perfect that it makes me doubt reality. Tonight, she brought me my pills before I went to sleep. She watched me take them, her eyes cold and unblinking. It did not feel like an act of love or patient care. It felt like she was confirming her absolute control over me. I am now deeply afraid of the medicine meant to help me. I have started to pretend to swallow my nightly medication. I hide the small white pill under my tongue until Sarah leaves. Then I go into the bathroom and flush it down the toilet. I saved one of the pills and hid it in my pocket. This morning, while everyone was out, I used the family computer. I carefully typed the identifying numbers from the pill into the search bar. The results came up almost instantly on the bright screen. It was not a medication for pain or for a head injury. It was a strong sedative prescribed for acute anxiety disorders. The common side effects listed were confusion and memory impairment. She has been actively drugging me to keep me in a fog. The anger I felt was cold, sharp, and intensely clarifying. It gave me the strength to look for more evidence. I went to the small closet in the laundry room. Sarah had stored the clothes she said I wore during the crash. Inside a large plastic bag was my heavy winter coat. I reached into the inside pocket, hoping for anything at all. My fingers found a small rectangular piece of cardstock. It was a one-way train ticket to a different city. The departure was scheduled for the morning of my accident. The diary was right about my detailed plan to escape. I was not driving on some icy road in the countryside. I was walking out on my marriage and on my old life. The entire story of the accident was an elaborate fiction. It was constructed to hide what she did to stop me. She did not save me from a crash. She caused one. I was not her patient. I have always been her prisoner. The train ticket became the anchor for my shattered reality. I knew that I could not remain passive inside this house. She had a plan for me, and I needed to discover it. Sarah left her laptop on the dining room table yesterday. She went to work in the garden just outside the window. This was the first real risk I knew I had to take. I walked over to the table and opened the machine. Her password was the name of the dog I didn't remember. I found a folder labeled with the name of a law firm. Inside were scanned documents and email conversations. She was preparing to have me declared mentally incompetent. The lawyer was drafting a request for a full conservatorship. Her argument cited my brain damage and paranoid delusions. She was using the confusion she created to steal my life. My hands were shaking, but my purpose became perfectly clear. I could not wait to get physically stronger to leave. I had to act immediately before she could file the papers. I opened her email and composed a message to my brother, David. We had been estranged, according to the photo albums. I prayed he still used his old email address from years ago. I wrote that Sarah was lying about the entire accident. I told him where to find my hidden diary. I begged him to help me before it was too late. I pressed the send button and deleted the email from her sent folder. Just then, I heard the back door slide open behind me. I closed the laptop and walked back to my room. My heart pounded in my chest like a trapped and frantic bird. The message was sent, and I could not take it back. For the rest of the day, an unbearable tension filled the house. Sarah acted as if nothing had happened at all. She spoke to the children in a soft, even voice. I stayed in my room, waiting for a sign of any kind. I hoped for a phone call from my brother, David. I listened for the sound of a car coming up the drive. The silence was a heavy blanket that smothered all of my hope. Later that night, Sarah came into my room. She was not carrying my dinner tray or my medication. She was holding her open laptop for me to see. On the screen was my email, marked as undeliverable. The address was no longer active. My message had failed. The mask of the caring wife completely dissolved from her face. Her expression was transformed into a mask of cold, hard rage. She told me that I had been incredibly stupid to try that. She said my little stunt had ruined everything for them. She informed me that she could no longer trust me alone. My world shifted at that exact moment. She took the doorknob off the inside of my door. The family computer was removed from the living room. The kids now look at me with a mixture of pity and terror. They won't speak to me. They just leave my food by the door. I am completely cut off from the entire outside world. Tonight, when she closed my door, I heard the sound of a deadbolt. The lock sliding into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. This room is no longer for my recovery. It is a cell. The sound of the deadbolt locking me in changed me. Hope was a weakness I could no longer afford to have. All that remained was a cold and very patient rage. I began my retaliation by refusing to eat the food. Trays of cold soup and bread piled up outside my door. My hunger was a statement that I would not cooperate. My body was the only thing I had left to control. Then I began a campaign of psychological warfare against her. I started talking to the empty room, knowing she was listening. I would loudly recall details from my hidden diary. I spoke about the small apartment I had secretly rented. I mentioned the one-way train ticket to a brand new life. I wanted her to know that her drugs had not worked. Her perfect illusion was a complete and utter failure. Next, I took my most desperate and morally gray step. I began writing messages on scraps of paper for my children. I slid the notes under my door when they brought the food. I asked Leo why his mother needed to sedate his father. I asked Maya if she knew about the money I had saved. I was pulling them into a war they did not choose. It was a cruel and selfish act, but I had no other options. Yesterday, I heard Leo arguing with Sarah in the hall. He asked her why I would need a ticket for a train. Her answer was not calm. It was a sudden, sharp cry of fury. A moment later, a different door slammed shut down the hall. I had finally broken the silence and planted a seed of doubt. The argument was a small victory that triggered a devastating defeat. A profound and unnatural silence consumed the house the next morning. I could not hear the television or the sound of teenage arguments. There was only the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs. My act of rebellion had not liberated my children. It had only succeeded in sealing them in a tomb of silence. I pulled myself to the window that overlooks our front yard. I saw Leo sitting on the porch steps, staring at nothing. His shoulders were slumped in a way that broke my heart. This was the direct consequence of the note I wrote him. I had armed him with a question he could not win against. A few hours later, I heard the heavy sound of suitcases rolling. They were being dragged across the hardwood floor in the hallway. I returned to the window and watched the final scene unfold. Sarah led Leo and Maya to the car like a prison guard. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were completely empty of light. My daughter Maya glanced toward my window for a brief second. I saw a flicker of the girl I used to know. Then her mother gently guided her head forward. She was sending them away to her sister's house. My notes had turned my own children into a dangerous liability. She was methodically cutting me off from the entire world. She was preparing the battlefield for her final decisive move. Now that we are alone, the performance is completely over. She no longer bothers with the pretense of patient care. Twice a day, she brings a thick protein shake to my door. She unlocks it and stands there while I drink it all. Her eyes are cold, and they dare me to refuse her. I know the sedatives are mixed into the thick, chalky liquid. The fog in my mind has become a dense, persistent presence. My thoughts move slowly like they are wading through mud. My body feels like it is weighted down with heavy lead. Yesterday, she stood in the doorway and calmly explained my future. She told me the institution was a quiet place in the country. She described the locked gates and the very friendly staff. She said I would be safe there from my own delusions. She smiled and told me the judge would sign the papers easily. A respected doctor's evaluation would make it all a simple formality. Last night, she spoke to me through the cold, solid door. Her voice was falsely cheerful and laced with pure poison. She announced that the doctor was coming tomorrow morning. He was scheduled to perform my final psychiatric evaluation. I know this is the last night of my life as I know it. Tomorrow, her fiction becomes my legally binding reality. I have to find a way out of this room tonight. I have been examining every object in this small space. The only thing of use is the heavy lamp on the nightstand. I am now working to break it apart for its solid base. This is my last chance. I spent hours sitting in the suffocating darkness of my room. The sedatives she fed me made my body feel disconnected. My limbs were heavy, but my mind was a single sharp point. It was focused on the heavy ceramic base of the broken lamp. That piece of a lamp was my only key to the future. I knew I could not wait for her to open the door. The doctor's arrival would be the end of my story. I had to force a confrontation on my own chosen terms. At 3 in the morning, I stood up on shaky legs. I took the lamp base and walked over to the window. The cold glass felt smooth against my trembling fingertips. I thought of my children's empty faces as they drove away. That final image gave me all the strength that I needed. I raised the weapon high above my head. I brought it down against the window with a loud, violent crash. The sound of shattering glass tore through the house's silence. It was the most beautiful sound that I had ever heard. I quickly moved to the side of the door and waited. I heard her bedroom door fly open down the hallway. Her footsteps were heavy and fast, filled with absolute rage. I heard the deadbolt slide back with an angry metallic shriek. The door swung open and she stormed into the dark room. She was looking at the broken window, not at the space behind her. In that moment, I saw her not as my wife. She was a stranger who had tried to erase my entire life. I swung the heavy lamp base with all of my remaining strength. The impact was a dull and sickening thud in the quiet. She collapsed to the floor without making a single sound. I did not check to see if she was breathing. I stepped over her body and walked out of my prison. The house was still and silent, a perfect domestic trap. I went to our closet and retrieved my diary. I took her laptop from the kitchen table. I found her purse and took her wallet and her car keys. All the evidence I needed was finally in my hands. I walked out the front door into the cold night air. I got into her car and started the engine. I did not look back at the dark house as I drove away. I was a ghost leaving behind his own elaborate tomb. I drove for hours with no destination in my mind. The world outside the car was a blur of dark trees. Headlights from other cars were like the eyes of predators. Each town I passed through was a ghost town, asleep and unaware. I finally stopped in a small city I did not recognize. I paid cash for a room in a cheap, forgotten motel. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and disinfectant. In the harsh fluorescent light, I finally opened her laptop. I found the emails to her lawyer about the conservatorship. I found the secret bank accounts where my money was moved. Then I found another folder she had hidden very well. It was filled with emails between her and another man. They had been having an affair for the last 2 years. They were not love letters, but a series of business plans. They detailed their plan to fake my accident after I left. They discussed how her performance would convince the doctors. They talked about the institution where I would be sent. They planned to sell my business and the house we owned. They wanted to start a new life together with my money. My wife had not been trying to keep me. She had been working with her lover to simply erase me. My escape and our fight were just an inconvenient delay. There was no pain or rage left inside me anymore. There was only a profound and bottomless, hollow emptiness. I spent the next few hours writing down my entire story. I was an architect building my final terrible project. I attached scans of my diary and her financial records. I attached the emails between her and her lover. I sent the entire package to a national news reporter. I also posted it all on a public confession forum. I pushed all of our secrets out into the bright, cold world. The sun is now starting to rise outside my window. The laptop is closed. Its screen is dark and silent. I did not save myself. I only ended the story. I am a free man who has absolutely nothing left. My home is a crime scene. My family is destroyed. My name is now just a headline in the making. I sit on the edge of the bed in this empty room. I am just waiting for the sound of a knock on the door. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.